Our contestants for this afternoon are Garrett Haragers from Oceana County, Natalie Warnett from Mecosta County, Ramey Lunsford from Ingham County, and Greg Sanford from Jackson County. In my role as moderator, I will not attempt to control or direct this discussion. I will not intervene unless or until disparaging or inappropriate remarks are made. With that in mind, the burden is on the competitors to moderate themselves and conduct themselves in a cooperative and congenial manner. The topic for discussion is, how should our nation's policies balance concerns about food insecurity against concerns about the safety or environmental impact of modern agricultural technologies? What role should farmers have in discussing and debating these issues in our society and with our lawmakers? Contestants, you may begin with your opening statements in random order.
I read a really nice article in the Farm News lately, and it was actually on our moderator, Mark Daniels up here. And in the article, he talked about how he doesn't like to be referred to as a producer. He likes to be referred to as a farmer. Think about it. Producers are usually associated with factories or assembly lines, where with farmers, there's a level of trust. Our discussion should focus around putting that farmer's face, our face, on the future of agriculture and leading that public discussion.
You know, if you're like me, you had to read this question about 4 times until it finally sunk in exactly what it was that we were to discuss. Finally, it clicked on me. What can we do as farmers and as representatives of farmers to help people understand and appreciate 2 of the most important things that we do? 1, food insecurity and making sure that people are fed, and 2, managing the environment that means so much to us. This is going to be a great discussion.
$9 billion people, that's what our generation has to feed right now. But if we're only concerned about those 9 billion people now, we aren't concerned about then the generation that has to come after us and how many billions of people they'll have to feed. So this is a very important topic for us to discuss, to figure out how to feed those 9 billion people with our technologies now, and how to be ready for the next generation, that we don't deplete our resources and destroy the environment to do it now.
Whether we like it or not, perception is reality. I think that speaks true to the question today, and where we need to go to kind of solve some of these issues. Agriculture needs to be on the forefront and educating the consumer to where we want them to be, not how they want to tell us we need to be. So I think education is going to be key, and I look forward to this discussion today. Thank you.
Contestants, you may now begin the discussion.
Ramey, I really like the 2 points you brought up in your opening. You know, and when you really look at that food security issue, one, I think first message we need to convey is, how do we convey, one, we live in a country where food is abundant. We have the safest, most abundant food supply in the world. You brought up those points. Maybe you want to expand on them a little bit.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. And yes, I would love to. Food insecurity right now is one of the scarier things that we're dealing with in Michigan. 1 in 6 people have the fear that they don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet we have so many different resources that show us we do have the food. We do have that ability, but it comes down to how are we actually going to make sure that they can get that, make sure they can receive that in their homes, in their communities. And at the same time, going back to the question, balancing this environmental impact and these safety issues that we're having to make sure our farms remain safe and can continue to reach that level. Does that make sense?
I agree with you on that. I believe there's this sense of, I guess, people are unsure. Mm-hmm. Consumers are unsure. They see negative media reports regarding some modern agriculture. I believe that as farmers, it's our job to combat that from a grassroots standpoint and show them, hey, we're not out to hurt anybody. We're consumers as well. We want to save food supply. We want to feed our children and our grandchildren and succeed with our operations in the future. I think that technology and social media will bring that to the forefront as far as we need to be proactive and reach out to that customer base, the customers being the consumers for the farmer, to get that done.
I definitely think social media is going to be the huge advantage for our generation. I mean, anything that you can put online now is instantly repeated, and you can see those results very quickly. But I think that also negatively affects us because it's harder for us to be in the forefront as farmers if people are moving along these different articles that aren't true or not backed by research. So Garrett, you said something about farmers being in the forefront of policymakers, but do you also think maybe the research needs to be there first?
I think the research does, and that we need to expound on the fact that the research comes with the facts. We're not making up these facts. We have research based, we have university research, we have third-party research showing that we have the safest food supply. We don't need to assume that a stay-at-home mother who watched Dr. Oz sending out tweets to all her friends, and we all know how fast that word spreads. Yeah. The rest of us may or may not be on right there to combat that. We need to proactively be out there and pushing the good word about agriculture and saying, yeah, these are research-based ideals that we're farming by, and we continue to create. We want to have a safe food, great environment to grow crops for years to come.
I think that comes back to putting that face on the industry, because when you look at it and what they're battling is they're battling this idea of corporations, they're battling this idea of mega farms. When in reality, and we know as we sit in this room, 96% of our farms today in the United States are still family owned. We know that they're generational farms. They've been there. Yes, they are bigger. They are more efficient to better feed the world. But it's a different look. And as far as the corporations go, good, bad, or indifferent, how different farmers feel about different corporations. The fact of the matter is we grow, compared to the 1980s when the average bushel of corn was somewhere around 110 in Michigan, and today we're sitting around 160. And you look nationwide, and that grows even further. There is no doubt that the technology advancements are making a difference in us being able to feed the world. Absolutely,
and looking at that educational piece and that social media piece, I think that's excellent for ways to deal with the public, with society. But one of the things we've been tasked with discussing is lawmakers. How are we going to get that message to lawmakers? And I appreciate the fact that we just left the P&E lunch. And some of the ideas that we've seen from some of these P&E directors is fantastic. They're getting the word out there. They're inviting the legislators to their farms so that they understand exactly what steps we take so that we are environmentally and safety friendly on our farms. And then we turn around and we hand them this need for food insecurity, to tackle food insecurities. Make sure that they understand these are two things we're looking at constantly. And how are they going to help others understand that? What are your thoughts on that, Natalie?
Well, Ramy, I was just thinking that point of bringing in the legislator into your own home, I think is huge. We had legislation come out to our farm, and be able to talk directly to them is hugely impactful. But I don't think the legislation is always the first mover. I think the social aspect of the general public can be a huge monumental movement if we're not careful and watch it. I'll have people come into the market all the time and ask me, am I selling the corn that has pesticides in it? There's clearly, there's this idea around technologies that aren't true, and we need to start there and work with the policyholders. But I think that Garrett was talking earlier about the social media. I think, Garrett, do you think that's where we should start, or with legislation?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think we need to get the legislators out, like both you and Ramy had said. Get the legislators out to the farm. That's where the grassroots starts. You get them to have confidence in the fact that these larger, quote-unquote, corporate farms are still family-owned. The majority of them family-owned, still with family ideals and traditions of wanting to carry on the family farm. multi-generational operations. And I think you see it gets more a personal level, I would say. And I think it's more effective that way than retweeting somebody's tweet. I think it really hits home much harder than it would.
But one thing that I think, go ahead.
I think
Greg.
we saw that last night with Governor Snyder. You know, he brought up the fact that, you know, he didn't have a background in agriculture, and it was that trip to that first farm, and then starting to be able to put, you know, we elect these leaders that, the rationale behind the economic advantages, how that will drive our industry here in Michigan or in the United States. And it's been a huge piece in what we've seen as a very pro-government within Michigan for agriculture. And, you know, to step back and look at that social piece that Natalie keeps bringing up, that's going to be, I think, a real battleground for us, and that's where people mobilize. We've mobilized, but you know, I know even, I believe it was Representative Ellers when he was looking at introducing the GMO Labeling Act here last year. Once that got out, word that his name might be on that bill, within 24 hours, 20,000 contacts between emails and calls came into his office. And obviously, our opposition has figured out how to mobilize. We don't even have enough people to combat that are farmers, so we have to look outside of that. And that comes with putting a face in the industry. But just how do, maybe Natalie has more ideas, she's brought up social media, but how do we continue to, it's going to be an uphill struggle as social media continues to grow.
I think what we were talking about earlier about having the research, I think if we can be working with researchers to bring out and expose what GMO really means, that it's not pesticides in the corn, and start to expose that and be able to pass it out, maybe it's an individual basis. I think it's the same is true for selling product, that if you make a customer happy, they're going to tell more people. If you can convince one person that this is not true and that what they're reading, they don't even have the whole picture and they're misinterpreting the information, then I think that will extend out. And I wonder if there's a way that we can get the safety measurements. I don't know, Ramey, if you know how to get that to the people as well.
Regarding the safety of it all, I think the biggest thing is to show people that our farms are safe. And we take it very important, that is very important to us. And again, bringing people out to them, making them feel safe within our farms. I think that's the biggest thing. And going along the lines of what Greg was saying, getting our legislators and our leaders within the state to get on a combine, to see what it feels like to walk through the barns and see what our farmers go through day to day and understand this is what we do for a living. Make them appreciate that, rather. Not just understand it, but appreciate that. And from there, relay that on to their constituents. Like you were saying, they can have such a huge impact. Just one legislator, one leader has such a huge impact. If we can have them help spread that message of ours, imagine the success we could have.
I agree. And going back to Greg's point about Governor Snyder and his recent visit, or when his first visit, rather, to a farm and how he was uneducated about it, really got into it. He comes every year. He's been to the state annual here since he's been elected, even before. He is one of the ones that is learning, wants to learn. He carries the MFB policy book with him. He knows what we are about. We are a grassroots organization, and he knows that's where it needs to start and keep going that way. I think if we could continue to have legislators like that, and get them educated on that same level, we can get a much, much greater stronghold, I would say. The same goes with Representative Dave Camp yesterday. Same idea. They're with agriculture all the way, and we got to keep people on that bandwagon, I guess.
I think they're pro-entrepreneur, and they know Farm Bureau and farmers are pro-entrepreneur, and they see that, even though they're not from a farm background. But to go back and kind of look at, okay, how do we combat this overwhelming wave of social media and misinformation? And you know, I think one of the things that I've seen lately, and if you pay attention to some of the major publications in our country that are well respected, we're starting to see more where Farm Bureau is working with those reporters, those leading reporters, getting them in front of the right scientists, getting the right information out there. So it isn't just opinion pieces, but it's actual science that are in reputable news sites, websites, newspapers, publications. We're starting to see a swing of that, even, you know, within the Washington Post, New York Times. You can see those articles, the Wall Street Journal. They're starting to come out, and it's very much stopping and putting away the emotions and looking at the science of this and how we're going to feed the world. And I think that's starting to change some opinions.
I agree, Greg, and I would echo that. The Huffington Post, the New York Times, all of those that you had mentioned are transitioning to more of these left-wing editorial type articles to more research-based conservative articles that show a true light of agriculture. And I think that's definitely the route that we need to be taken, because those are large media outlets that more so people take more serious than some sorts of social media.
But I definitely think that research is being exposed. But I think when you were talking earlier about bringing a face to the farm, we also need to let them know that farmers are not against science. We support it. I think a lot of the public mind is starting to feel that farming is trying to get about profit or just to do, that they're undereducated, they don't know what's going on in the world. And I think that we need to change that face, that farmers are for science. And if there's something that we see that isn't good for the farming side, we want our next generation to stand up. I mean, you were talking about the 4th generation, 5th generation. We want the next generation to be able to farm, so we don't want to deplete those resources or damage the environment. And so I don't know if any of you guys have experienced that on your farm, that the generations you do desire it to continue.
You know, I've just bought my grandfather's farm. It was started by his father, bought in 1908, and I couldn't think of anything greater than I just had a son and be able to pass that farm, and there is no greater resource. And the environmental, when I look at crop rotation and no-till practices and what I want to do on my farm as far as the crops I use and the pesticide carryover and how I manage that. Yeah, every step of that is how do I make this long-term viable? How do I make this long-term sustainable? And that's the face that we've got to put on it. I think you're absolutely right.
And I would echo that, Greg, that we have to show the great benefits of our production practices. The increase in bee pollinator health, in soil health, everything to maintain a sustainable agriculture going into the future. I believe that's what we have to focus on. All of those issues that are real touch points, we have to be proactive with those and come out on the forefront of it before the negativity comes out. We don't necessarily have to, like you were saying earlier, we don't have the numbers to combat this stuff. Well, let's get out there before that happens. Let's show them what we're doing. Let's be more transparent with it. Would you agree, Ramey?
Absolutely, I would agree. In fact, I think we have kind of mapped together a pretty good solution for this particular question, which is education. Making sure people understand, appreciate, and are sharing this knowledge with each other. I think that's the biggest thing that we can take out of this particular discussion is people might not get it. They think they understand, and that's sometimes a little more dangerous.
Again,
it's helping them understand it the way
correct.
that we want them to.
Like I said earlier, it was perception is reality.
Exactly.
And I think we need to have a paradigm shift, I would say, in the view of the consumer to this large corporate factory, quote unquote, farm, right, to a more wholesome family operation that still wants to be a viable business in the future to maintain that operation and carry it on to the next generation. Like Greg said, that's very, very touching to hear that from somebody as a consumer standpoint, because they will react and touch with that.
I think the transparency is key. One of the great websites that I don't know if you visited, but GMO Answers is kind of a coalition between multiple farm organizations and leading industry manufacturers. And I think the stat I heard recently is they have answered over 900 questions. You can type in the question, whether you're a farmer or a house mother or urbanite, and they've answered over, and it's that transparency. We're not trying to hide anything here. We'll show you what the science is. We'll show you the technology that we have available, and I think that transparency piece, like you guys are talking about, is key to putting that trust factor back in.
Well, and that's where I want to give kind of a shout out, if you will, to what Troy Bancroft has done at AgriLiquid Fertilizer. His IQ Hub, if you haven't had the opportunity, is fantastic. And it's that hands-on thing. It's that appreciation, education, and walking away with a good knowledge of this is what agriculture was and this is where it's going. And one of the things that he mentions is, how are we going to feed all of the people on the planet? And he puts it out as a challenge to any of the students that come through there. It's ideal, just like the webpage that you're talking about, it's ideal for people to walk in without an understanding and walk out with a goal, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And back to Greg's point on the GMO answers, I had read that that website had over 500,000 visitors in the short time, less than a year that it was up, with an average site visit of roughly 5 minutes. A lot of people may visit a site like that and kind of move on if they don't agree with what it may say, but a 5-minute site visit for a lot of people is quite considerable for an issue like that.
Natalie, have you seen anything similar to that?
I was just going to say, in our market, we have the book, Medell's Kitchen, so that we can pass that out if they need that, if they want to read that as a resource. But I do think the internet is a much easier way for them to access that. And we've talked about the need for this education, but I wonder if we can come up with some solutions, such as putting up more signs, the Centennial Farm signs. It's a very quick visual, oh, there's a family farm in the area. It gives us, it lets us talk to the consumer, the public, without us saying a word, and they're visually seeing that. Or those MEAP verified signs. I can't tell you how many people come into the store, have no idea what MEAP is, and are very excited for our farm and have congratulated us. So I think that if we can do that through signage, I don't know, Ramey, have you seen anything that you think that we can do to promote these things?
You know, we've, within all the discussions that we've had today leading up to these finals, I learned of some of the billboards that we've seen, of some of the web pages, the social medias. There's a lot of different things that are out there that are great touch points, but I think the biggest thing is the number and the quality of the touch points. We want to make sure that when they walk into, when they drive into your county or when they drive by your farm, there's 1, 2, 3 touch points of a sign here, an explanation of what exactly they're going to experience, and then a hands-on piece. The more of that we can offer, I think the more people are going to understand the answer to these 2 questions.
And, you know, I think we bring a unique vantage point, too, as being the state of Michigan, being the second most diverse state as we are. You know, we look at the dairy industry, the fresh fruit and vegetable industry. We have so much more contact with consumers than the typical producer. Another project that I found out about recently I thought was pretty neat was called Project 155. And it's based around that idea that a farmer feeds 155 people per farmer. And getting out and farmers touching 155 people and telling their story over the next year. What's that story to tell? You know, it makes me think about, I was sitting waiting for my wife about a year ago at a restaurant up in Mackinac City. I was waiting for her to get up there so we go over the island. And I got into a conversation about what I do with the 2 ladies next to me. And they began to ask me a lot of questions. And those, just that misinformation, but that conversation, you know, it was 10, 15 minutes, and it was a lot of them asking me questions. But how far did that go to changing them and then their circle of influence and that following circle of influence?
And it's not just the 10, 15-minute speeches. A lot of us go to industry conferences. You run into people in the elevator. You got to have a 30-second elevator speech to explain what we do in ag and envision it in a positive light to those individuals. And like Greg said, it's kind of like a 6 degrees of separation here. I mean, they're going to tell people who are going to tell people, and word spreads extremely quick. Like we talked about earlier, we mentioned social media. We can't look at that in a negative light. We are in a unique situation where we are at in our generation, where we are able to communicate so quickly with people, but we need to use that to our advantage to reach out to these people in a positive light.
I think there also needs to be, and going back, 2 points that you guys touched on, and going back to that, you know, feeding the world piece and looking at 9.5 billion people by 2050, and you talked about, feeding the world and where that food's coming from. You know, as a person that spent a fair amount of time, I've done mission work in multiple third world countries in this last summer in South Africa working with AIDS orphans. You know, when I look at something like golden rice and the technology that we've developed there and the fact that they won't even let it in to be produced in their country, I consider that a form of genocide. I really do, in the problems that we can solve. What we've brought, biotechnology is not just in agriculture. It's part of the medical field. It's part of the pharmaceutical field. We've done things in mining with it. There's so much technology out there right now that we can benefit the world, we can benefit human health, we can benefit mankind, and we're sitting in the breadbasket of the world, and we can feed that world, and that's something that we need to drive home.
I appreciate the way that you said that. That obviously means a lot to you. And I think that that's something that a lot of people here share. It's that desire to feed the world and to do it well and to make sure that it's safe and it's coming from a place that people can feel proud that this is where it came from. That's something that I wish I could experience a little bit more, having a desk job all day long. So good for you. Natalie, have you experienced anything like that?
I was just going to hit on when we went to Haiti. I think this is a national problem, but we are a global market, and if we want to be able to bring our products internationally, we need to be able to not just do this within our nation, but bring it globally. And in Haiti was the same problem. When the earthquakes happened, they destroyed all of this donated corn and seed for them because it was GMO. And being there and being a farmer, trying to help the farmers learn about the resources, you can see where we don't want to go. What direction do we not want to be? They're up in the mountains, and their land's starving because it's all eroding because they've cut down all the trees, and there's nothing to keep all the soil from going down to the farmer below. So while the lower farmers are experiencing an abundance of produce, the upper farmers are seeing this deprivation. I think our nation can get that way if we aren't thinking about the next generation. I think we need to let people know that's not what we want to see for our families and for the next generation.
Right, and I touching back to what Greg was talking about with golden rice and what you were talking about with the Haiti corn being rejected. Most recently, we can all remember China's rejection of a traded corn.
Right.
And we look at that, and I think education is key. Here we are again coming back to the education point where we need to showcase how much research comes into this, how many years of stuff comes on the back burner before it even comes up to the consumer point. It's cost over $300 million in 3 years to bring a trait to the market. With that, it's a huge barrier to entry for small companies to get on there. These large companies have a lot of resources as far as getting a lot of trials out there, getting university research done, stuff like that. We need to showcase, I think, to show these other countries, and we need to be on the forefront of that again because it's shed in a negative light.
Going back to the main question, we're talking about working with lawmakers, and I think that's a perfect example of things going on overseas, that we need to make sure that our legislators and leaders are very well aware of these trait relationships and what's going on, how we feel we can make a difference, and have them help share that message overseas. I think that's a great way.
You know, the one what you hear the argument keep coming back to oftentimes is there's been no long-term study. Well, the long-term study is in 1994, Roundup Ready soybeans was introduced. Since then, they figure somewhere around, it's now reached over, of animals that have been fed GMO crops has reached over 1 trillion meals in our country. I think that's a pretty definite long-term study. And you know, and in moving forward, as far as looking at the issue of feeding our country and feeding the world, we need to find a way to convey, and yes, we still need to put a face on it, but these technologies are going to come faster with chipping technology, with producing seed that Monsanto has and producing genetics. We're starting to look at the advancements in the equipment, in looking at satellite imagery and down to, the advancements are going to come fast, and it's going to become more efficient. Robotics and milking. There needs to be some way that we can convey that this is good treatment for the environment, it's good treatment for animals, and it's going to help us be more efficient to produce your food.
I think the research can back that up, but I think we need to invest more into the third-party research. People that are not invested into the profits of the farm, that are not Monsanto doing their own research, because there's a trust factor, there's a trust issue in general. I can say how many times I've been overseas and heard that they don't trust Americans. They don't trust that we are doing it in the best interest, that we're somehow poisoning their food for them because we don't want to see them succeed. So we have to have this trust in maybe it's looking outside of our nation and doing a global third-party study involving the European Union. If they don't believe in GMOs, let's see the research to prove it, and getting them into the argument, because if they start to see that the structure isn't there to support it, then maybe we can change the whole world's view.
And as you continue to say, make this look as positive as possible. We don't want to create the technology that is going to scare other countries from what products we are creating. Like you were saying, Roundup Ready was one of the things that changed agriculture. As we move forward, we want to make sure that other people are appreciating, understanding exactly what we're creating, why we're creating it, how it's going to benefit them in the future.
And Greg and Ramey both touched on technology there, and I think that's one issue we haven't touched as far as hardware technology in agriculture. Something that we need to be focusing on. I mean, drone technology is one hot topic right now. Nobody knows how to regulate it. Nobody knows what to do. But agriculture seems to want to move that way and has a fit for it at this point. We need to showcase why we are using it. It's one of those, another thing, again, public perception. They're concerned it's going to be a privacy issue. We're going to be flying over, looking at what they're doing. We're looking at it to grow a better crop. Again, Natalie touched on over 9 billion people in 2050. Well, we need to show them how much we have to grow to get to that point, and every little bit counts at that point. We got to use the technology to get to that point.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's interesting what you said about the drone piece. That's just one small step. Imagine what's going to be coming after that, and how do we make sure people aren't scared of this stuff? We're not using this technology to frighten them. We're using it to make better products.
And not only on the public side of it, we need to be there, how we're working with Farm Bureau now to write that language, because even though it's not widely used yet, it might be. And so if we can be on the forefront of putting that language into our policy book, then that helps support our mission before it even is applicable for all of us.
You know, I read an article a while back ago about the founder of Climate Corp, and he was also one of the founders of originally in Google. He sold Climate Corp to Monsanto here about a year ago. And when everyone in the Napa Valley and that San Francisco area was, why would you sell to Monsanto? And he said, you know, when you really sit down and you look at and you meet the people face to face and you talk to them about what they're trying to do to change the world, he goes, this was the right direction to go for our company. I'm sure the $1 billion helped that they wrote him, but you know, he really believed that they were going to take his company and use it for the better human good. And I think eventually we'll start seeing that as that technology develops.
I think we also have to be on the same page of the benefits of all the technology and to educate other farmers, because it's not infrequent where people will come up to me and ask me a question about a different aspect of farming that I'm not used to or knowledgeable about, and then I need to have that information prepared for them because they are relying on me as a trusted source. So I think we need to educate each other about the different technologies in each of our fields so that we can present that face for the public.
And I think Farm Bureau is a great place to start because of all of the members that already believe in it and the legislators that are buying into our mission and the way that we can communicate and get to the public.
And not only that, look at the diversity we have. Look at all the crops we've discussed through this week. How many facets of agriculture we need to know in the state of Michigan to be able to communicate with the consumer. It's stuff. All of that kind of stuff comes into play when you're communicating with them, and you have to know just enough. You don't have to be a professional on it, but you have to have just enough to shed, again, a positive light.
Thank you, contestants. You now have 1 minute to prepare your closing statement. Audience, please remain silent while the contestants prepare their statements. Contestants, please put your pens down, and you may now begin with your closing statements in random order.
I think when Garrett got started today, he hit the nail on the head when he said it comes down to education, making sure that people are aware of what message we have for agriculture, making sure that the food insecurities is a concern of ours, and that the safety and environmental quality of our farms is a concern of ours. And we're doing what we need to. We're taking the steps, the important steps, to make sure that we are meeting the needs and doing so in a way that that will feed the rest of this country and the rest of the world. I appreciate this discussion today because I came in not really understanding exactly what this question was about, and walked away feeling like I get it. These guys have a lot of knowledge, and what they have brought to the table is very important vision for agriculture and for our future.
It's very difficult to have an open discussion about how we're going to farm and feed the world in 2015 when our opposition wants us out of business in 2050, when our opposition wants us out of business in 2015. You know, but we're sitting in the organization that it is the driver of that conversation, that can be the face of that conversation. Our opposition has already had victories in Hawaii in recent votes, in Oregon in recent votes. But we need to continue to tell that story, continue to put our face to it, continue to educate, like we talked about, and continue to use the resources available to us through an organization like Farm Bureau and the other organizations that we are a part of to tell that story.
This discussion has been very valuable to me because not only am I meant to be a face in agriculture, I get to see other faces in agriculture and talk around that and how we can bring light to and educate through our social media, through our ability to bring lawmakers into our homes, for them to get on the combine and be with us and see what's really happening. Because I think it's very important for us to show that we're not about our generation, we're about the future generations, and that we have a centennial heart. We have a heart to continue to feed America forever. And that globally, we can also start to begin that trust through our policymakers by letting them know what we're doing as a farmer, and that our goal is to provide people with healthy food, the food that we are eating, and that the whole desire there is about the people.
I'll echo again what I originally started out with, that perception is reality. I believe going forward, discussion meets like this, meeting with peers where we discussed a similar question here that we all were a bit confused about to start. We were able to come to, I would think, a couple conclusions of where we need to go. We also had a good discussion with many audience members that I believe are going to be able to be our advocates. Take a lot of the ideas that we brought up today and take them to go tell their family members, go tell their friends, go tell somebody that's not involved in ag about some of the stuff we talked about today. Some of these facts we had, very beneficial for elevator speeches. We need to showcase to legislators how we are doing, what we are doing, and why we are doing to get to that 2050 number everybody throws around for 9 billion people. We'll get there. We just need a lot of education. We just need a lot of education, use the technology we have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now turn the meeting back over to our program chairman, Mr. Caleb Stewart.
Thank you, contestants, and let's give them a big round of applause.